Dr. Renee Reset. Renee is a lifetime, keep that word in y'all head, certified chemistry, biology, math, and mathematics teacher, along with holding a lifetime principal certification in the state of Missouri. Renee holds a master's degree in secondary administration and a PhD in educational leadership and policy studies, both from UMSL. She spent 13 years in the St. Louis Public Schools in a variety of roles, from teacher through principal. Now she works as a director of research and evaluation at Rung for Women. That's a mouthful. Help us welcome Renee.
How are you doing, Carmen?
I'm very well. How you doing today?
You know, one foot in front of the other, hanging in there.
Yeah. Well, I thank you, Renee, for just getting on the bridge with us. I don't even know where to begin. Did you get a chance to look at the TED Talk?
I did. I really enjoyed what Susan had to say.
Okay. In that TED Talk, just outlining Susan and thinking about Bridge to Hope, what do you know, like in reference to Bridge to Hope? I'll backtrack before we even get on the TED Talk. What do you know about Bridge to Hope St. Louis?
So I know that I met you at a St. Louis Public School Board meeting, and I heard you speak during the public comment period. And I remember being really inspired because as a teacher and principal, the best parents, the ones that I enjoyed working with the most, are the ones who fiercely advocate for what their kids need and deserve. And so it was like this instant respect and sort of awe of you and Kay and the work of Bridge to Hope. Because I really think that it's a game changer for St. Louis.
Okay. So just thinking about that, you were in awe and more inspired by what Kay and myself and other parents with us, what we were saying and doing. But thinking about education, and we're going to unpack a lot, and thinking about that TED Talk and having emotional courage, we get a lot of pushback saying that we are too aggressive. We have too much bark, and we just need to be more passive when talking about education and the state of education with our kids. What made you think something different?
Yeah, I think that's big. So I think that it's rooted in someone's understanding of oppression and white supremacy. And if systems are designed to keep certain people oppressed and enroll in with services that aren't what would be acceptable for anyone's child. And so I think it starts with a fundamental understanding that passion can sometimes come off as anger, and that sometimes emotions can be misinterpreted or misrepresented when they're interpreted across lines of difference. And especially in a school where there's a power dynamic, I think they can get even more muddled.
So knowing that parents are a part of the puzzle, like an essential piece of the puzzle, Bridge to Hope is on a mission to have what we call bridge repair. The only way we're going to change the face of education is to really have parents involved in that. We also know that the expressions and views of parents sometimes can come off aggressive and or mean and in anger. So as we like tear that apart and we look at like just a general school, what is the missing piece, would you say, in a school that prevents equity and a fair chance at a quality education for children?
Yeah, I think really at the root of the issue is funding. So when we think about how schools are funded, which is based on property tax, and you think about the history of devaluing communities that house Black people predominantly, like when you look at the disinvestment in North St. Louis, you're never going to have an equal footing on which the schools are able to grow and thrive because you're not funding them with the same amount of property tax. And you get this very disproportionate amount of money going to a wealthy district like Clayton versus, you know, what's going to the average school in St. Louis Public. So it's fundamentally built on an unequal system.
And that's a lot, and you probably understand that more than I because you study policy, you have a doctorate in education, so you probably can unpack that much better than me. But when I hear somebody say it comes down to funding and property tax, I still will say, hogwash. We can still reevaluate education and change the face of education for all kids. Why are we stuck in the old times? Why can't professionals such as yourself come to the table and say, this just isn't right? Property tax, do we really have to use property tax? Is there another mechanism or measurement that we can use to fund these schools? And when you even look at property tax, that's not even distributed equitably, if that's the right word, in schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you can compare and contrast Missouri and Illinois, for example. And in Illinois, they're actually at the state level giving extra money to schools that have less ability to raise money through their property taxes. So, for example, a district like St. Louis Public would be receiving additional extra dollars from the state as a result of saying these schools are adequately funded. And in Illinois, there are schools that show 280% of adequacy. So you have schools that are 2.5, almost 3 times overfunded, and other schools that are only 40% fully funded. So you do see examples in different states where they've attacked it at a state level. But ultimately, you know, some of the other things you're describing are allocation of resources within a district and what schools are getting additional resources or additional teachers or additional social workers or counselors. Or you see decisions that are instead based on student allocation and are potentially, you know, negatively impacting schools that might have additional needs.
So even trying to unpack that, like for an average parent, you would have lost them pretty much at the beginning of that conversation. And I still have to go back and look at that and say, okay, I have to make this make sense for me. I still don't understand how a school system like St. Louis Public, and now you can probably help me, we're talking about like $300 million budget or something like that. And I don't know if it goes across the state of Missouri or just for St. Louis City. They get a lot of money, but that money does not trickle down and help children in my community, Black and brown children. I don't understand how they're doing effective bridge repair. And then we get an article that just came out a couple of days ago saying they have 10 of the highest ranked schools. How is that possible when we're graduating children that can graduate with a D average, Renee? We didn't even know that kids can graduate with a straight D average, and we're counting that as good.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of answer there. I mean, I think when you look at just the operational costs of something like St. Louis when you're operating, you know, 70 plus buildings, when you think about the age of those buildings, the cost of maintenance and repair, your budget gets eaten up with things that aren't necessarily in direct service of students. They're to operate the district, but they aren't those tangible things like reading teacher or books or counselor or social worker. And I think that's unfortunately where some of the mismatch and mismanagement can come into play, is when you think about just that sheer operational costs, like all the children in St. Louis Public that get on a bus every day and how much it costs to bus the entire city's children all across the city. I mean, it's astronomical when you think about a different district that maybe like a Maplewood, Richmond Heights, that's exceptionally small geographically. Most kids walk to school, so they don't even have that expense of the buses that the St. Louis Public would.
So we are, in essence, really taking care of our teachers and not really taking care of our students.
When you say we, do you mean the district or do you mean education?
Our tax dollars, that $300 million, in essence, it really doesn't trickle down and help the kids. It just puts a Band-Aid on a sore.
Yeah, I would argue it doesn't take care of teachers either, because when you look at, again, when you look at salaries across the region, you know, I had a lot of teachers that left schools where I was an assistant principal or principal because they could make $5, $10, in some cases $15,000 more when they changed districts and left St. Louis Public. And these were amazing teachers who were committed to kids. But when you're asking them to take a $10,000 pay cut for essentially the same amount of work, that's not a fair expectation to put on a teacher.
I started off saying Sawabona in a TED Talk, and it means I see you. You're important to me. I value you. You are a lifetime educator, a lifetime principal. Like, if you guys don't know Renee, you got to figure out who this lady is, pull up. Like, she's a dope chick. But here's my question, Miss Dope Lady. Like, you left. You left us, you left the schools. Like, you push policy, you research policy, like your pull-up game is strong. But you left us. Why you leave?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think that emotionally for myself, I hit rock bottom. In the fall of 2017, I actually had a staff member pass. And instead of the district allowing me to rehire for that deceased staff member, the district actually didn't hire for that position. And it was in that moment that I knew that my life to the district was not valuable and that no one was taking care of me or looking out for me as a person. And it was emotional courage that had me then, I had to walk away because I wasn't well. And I didn't feel like someone was ensuring I was healthy and good and in order to do the job I needed to do.
Let's go deeper with that. When you were a principal, because you were a principal in the city of St. Louis Public Schools, and I'm gonna throw this out here, and if you can attach this, I would appreciate it. Like, I'm a charter school mom. I've been in the city of St. Louis Public Schools. I've been in the county public schools. Crystal is a private school mom, but we fight for all kids because it doesn't matter where your kids go. So would you please tackle that in this question? Like, you are the principal of a public school in the city. I strongly feel that poop run downhill. So if the school is struggling, what is leadership doing? As I'm getting to know you more, I know what your pull-up game is like. What is it that you needed to be able to effectively support our kids? And what didn't you get? Like, how do parents pull up and support you so that our kids get what they need? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I would say one example that I would give at the school I was at, 1 in 4 of my students had actual documented asthma. So 25% of my school, that's just the documented ones. And we know that there were probably some that didn't have their paperwork on file. But I only had a nurse on site 2 days a week and every other Friday, right? She was a part-time employee at my school. But what happens when a kid gets an asthma attack on a day when the nurse isn't there? Who then has to take over that role and provide the care that that child needs? And to me, if you allow that to happen and then another person then isn't doing their job because they're providing the care, right? It's this trickle effect of then the whole school has to shuffle and do different jobs because you're not staffing it fully with what the school needs. And no matter how much I reported that data up to the district, I wasn't getting that other nurse. Like, I wasn't getting her 5 days a week. And it became to the point where I was driving myself mad trying to get things as simple as a nurse 5 days a week. And when you think about a private school, what private school parent would tolerate a nurse on site 2 days a week? Would they? Because I doubt it, right? And if you were to drive over into Clayton and ask them if they would be okay with their elementary student going to a school that didn't have a nurse 5 days a week, or even a high school student 5 days a week, most of those athletic programs have full-time training facilities so that if a kid has a sprained ankle, they're going and getting rehab on site. That's commonplace, right? But that's a substandard care that I think, unfortunately, you see is more pervasive than it's just unbelievable.
Sure, you can continue with story after story after story of these type of broken systems. I caught maybe like a 1 minute, 30-second clip of something that you did with EdHub. I think it was EdHub. And you talked about how potentially we can fix this system. Can you share a little bit of what you shared on that video?
Trying to recall what the
You talked about how there's all of this money and the schools are just scattered all over the place and how we need to pull that in, consolidate all of that, because we're like, I think your words were bottom side up or upside down or something like that.
Yeah. So when we think about, and I've done an analysis, I did it for WePower over the summer. When you look at the number of students in St. Louis Public, right around 20,000, and you compare that number to other districts our size that are comparable, say, a Springfield, Rockwood, like other districts in the 20,000 to 24,000 range. They're operating about a third of the number of buildings that St. Louis Public does. That's all those extra buildings with light, heat, water, property maintenance, all of those factors. And so you're running schools that are essentially empty, and you're paying to operate the full building. So it's just an inefficient way to, again, support the whole child when you then can't provide a full-time nurse or full-time social worker and even additional social workers and additional support for those that really need it.
Okay, I'm gonna jump left field because we believe in academic excellence and equity for all children. That is what Bridge to Hope stands for. We have parents and families in every arena of education, from private to virtual to charter schools. So let's talk about charter schools. I recall a conversation that we had a couple of months back. And one thing that I cannot get charter schools to understand that is important is IEPs and supporting children with IEPs, and how frustrating it is for parents to have these brick walls that are up because they have their own governing bodies and their own policies, and they don't really have to accept children with IEPs. And do they really offer a free and appropriate public education if they don't? Like, we're talking about emotional courage. How does a parent advocate for her child when the cards are already stacked against them?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really great point in that, you know, charter schools are typically smaller than a big public system, and therefore there's less variety in the type of student that they serve. And unfortunately, if your kid has needs that are really unique and that sort of isolates the kid or makes them the only one that needs that type of service, I know parents can get really frustrated. I think in those situations, you know, parents have to really strongly consider, like, if my child's needs aren't being met by this school, like, am I going to legally sort of go on the offense against, you know, and get into discussion with the school, or am I going to actually seek a school that is going to provide the services and I can see evidence of other children receiving those services when I ask for a school visit or a school tour? You know, I think it comes down to what capacity does the parent have and where do they see their most effective path forward, fighting where they're at or leaving and sort of taking their child to a better environment.
So you talk about advocacy, and one voice can make a ripple, and 10 voices can make a little bit louder noise, and 100 can really let you know that we're going to pull up Jefferson City. So even thinking about all of those different pieces, we have this excellent program called Navigate STL, and that gives us the option to figure out where we want to send our school and what the neighborhood is like, and it got all of these little bells and whistles. Love it. However, we're still talking about the urban core and emotional courage. Every option we pretty much have is a failure factory. So how do we change the face of education? How do we get parents to understand? Now, I'm asking you, put on that PhD hat. We are in crisis. Do you agree with that statement, or do you think that we're okay and we can continue as we are?
I don't know. I would say we're absolutely in crisis. And I think that's where I look at this current situation that we're in with COVID-19 as sort of a boiling point or a tipping point, if you will, because I think it has only exposed even further the inequities that a lot of us have maybe read about or taught or been in mix on, you know, and it's made it very real and tangible for a lot of parents. And I think you've watched a lot of parents not get access to remote learning because they didn't have a device, because they didn't have home internet. And then you've seen a district provide Wi-Fi hotspots that ran out of data, or maybe didn't even get the tablet to the kid. And when you think about, we've got a moment to pivot. We're also heading into a major election year at both the federal, state, and local level. And I would say that there's all kinds of places and ways for parents to take a stand and to fight.
So thinking about that, and as we're heading into the federal election, I encourage parents, and if you have anything, like jump in and say, you know, say that we have to look at what is being said in the education policies on the federal level. Also, you have to get counted. The census matters. If you're not counting people, that affects our community and the resources that come into our communities. And then that makes teachers like Dr. Renee Reset say, you know what? I can't do this anymore. We can't lose that type of support. So be counted. But even after the federal election, the one that really matters to us is coming up in what's that, March, May, April?
Yeah,
April.
I think April of 21.
And that's the one that mattered. That's when we have to start looking at these school board people. That's when these people that are running for Senate and for House and for all of these positions, we have to pull up. And we need to know what their stance is. Because if they're not for the kids and they're not for families and Black and brown kids, they definitely are not going to see your kids to and through.
And I think, so I think we've seen a good example of the impact of, Missouri state politics, right? Parents are aware school's starting a week later this coming year. And that's because the tourism lobby was so strong in Missouri, in like the Ozarks and that area, that they were able to convince the Republican-controlled state House and Senate to move the start date back so that they get more vacation days in summer to make more money, right? Is that what's best for kids, or is that what best for the resort owners in Lake of the Ozarks, right?
It makes sense, because this ain't that.
This
I don't know. And even taking it a step further, let's touch Jefferson City for a minute. I don't look like you, Renee. You know that, right? I'm chocolate, you're vanilla. But here's my thing. I go to Jefferson City and I fight for all kids. I fight for academic excellence. We fight for academic excellence, equity for all children. Kids that look like you, kids that look like me. It doesn't matter whether they're in the rural community or in the hood. We will pull up anywhere. But my problem is people that look like me fight against choice. And they fight against choice because of a charter issue. Whatever this division and war, can you touch that a little bit? I do not understand why there's this huge divide between the Democrats and the Republicans in the city, and why people that look like me fight hardest against that. And I dare to say that's all a union's agenda. Like, I don't get any of that hogwash. Make it make sense.
Yeah, so I think my view on this one has actually changed over time, and it's because of a man named Howard Fuller. And he's a parent organizer out of Milwaukee, amazing, amazing man. And I heard him give a talk, and he made me realize that the decision on where you send to school is a right that some parents execute, and some parents are able to execute more easily than others, but you should never deny someone that right to make a choice for them. Like, for example, I'm pro-choice when it comes to reproductive rights, because I believe that every woman should make her own choice. And I recognize I had to apply that same lens when it came to education, because it's not for me to decide what school is better for you as a parent, period, full stop. And that's where the conversation for me began and ended. I used to be anti-charter because I saw it, pulling funding from public schools. And it's something that I had to really grapple with, because but ultimately, I believe in the power of the parent to make the decisions for their child. And if I hold that belief, then it has to extend to charter schools and private schools as well.
Why do charters come to Missouri?
What's that?
Why do charter schools come to the state of Missouri?
Parent advocates.
Yeah, and if you do a little bit more research, you'll find that SLPS was failing horribly. And they brought charter schools in with the hopes to be competitive and maybe push them to do better. And 20, 30 years later, they're still not doing any better. And it appears that they feel like they don't have to. So how do you hold someone accountable to giving your children what they need if they won't even give you what you need with the advanced knowledge that you have?
Yeah, I mean,
how do we even fight that?
Yeah, I think that's where ultimately parents are the consumer of school, right? And if your customer service as a district or as a school isn't good, then the most impactful thing the parent can do is leave and take their child to a different place. And so I think that you have to put pressure on a district to treat you better, right? And how do you do that? Well, you say, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. Either, I'm going to remove myself from it. And that's what I think you see as being a benefit to school choice.
And as we look at all the other organizations out there, they are phenomenal. We Power, holding SLPS accountable to better budgets, phenomenal. Everyone has a place on the bridge, but we also recognize here at Bridge to Hope, policy change, real change happens in Jefferson City. And if we want real change, we have to pull up to our local people, the aldermen, the House representatives, the Senate representatives, the state representatives. Like those people, they make those decisions. The school board people were this much went and voted. Nobody voted for these people. Mm-hmm. Now we got to hold foot to fire to make sure that they have the best interests of our children. And if it takes one parent at a time to bridge, that is what we do, because that's what we're supposed to do. And I'm going to shift and kind of, because we're closing this out, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah. I know that the district had a pretty aggressive sort of stance on school closure. And I know that since COVID-19 happened, they've sort of pulled back and said, we're not going to do that right now, which I think was the right decision to make. I mean, I support Dr. Adams recognizing that this is traumatic enough. You don't need to add trauma on trauma. But I do think that that conversation needs to have. So I wonder, where do you see, or what role do you see Bridge to Hope and parent advocates playing, given that, it isn't fiscally responsible to run as many schools, and there's a lot of good reasons why we do need to consolidate as a district given the population decline in the city?
I believe Bridge to Hope's major role is not even getting Dr. Adams to understand, it's creating a partnership with Dr. Adams where he understands that we are here to support him in being great. We are here to make sure that parents have a voice and that voice is heard. And his success is the parents' success and the children's success. However, if that means consolidating schools, if that means changing the face of education, if that means really putting an influence on 0 to 3 literacy, to make sure that we can close the prison to pipeline gap so these children can get to and through college. That's what that means. If that means making sure that you can bridge gaps with charter schools to leverage some of the things that they're doing and maybe them leveraging some of the things that you're doing, that is what we're prepared to do. Whatever is needed to make sure that our children are successful, but at the same time, and I hope I'm answering your question, we will also pull up if you keep denying us a place at the table. It doesn't matter that we're charter and private school parents that are the face maybe right now of Bridge to Hope. We have parents in every arena, and our voices deserve to be heard because we're city residents. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of emotion attached to school consolidation, and so I think it's a very sensitive topic, I know, for a lot of people.
But I do believe that the consolidation is necessary. Why are we keeping all of these schools open? I believe in my culture. I believe in my history. I'm so St. Louis. But to keep all of these schools open is a disadvantage to the children. So the consolidation, it's a no-brainer. It got to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, appreciate that. Other questions? I think maybe, have you, as an organization, been in touch with parents that are maybe struggling with remote learning? Maybe what are you hearing from parents at different age levels around sort of in your network?
This will be not just across SLPS, but it'll be charters alike. This is a hard shift. A lot of parents are not tech savvy. Some of our parents can't read. They do not have the literacy level that we have. So they are struggling to navigate their children through this technology. One specific parent, still cannot even figure out how to log on to the technology. It's almost as though, and this is heartbreaking, if myself or Crystal does not reach out to a person in power, these parents do not get a response from anyone because, Renee, the work is just enrichment anyway. So they're struggling, and they know that their kids are either just going to get passed on for the majority of them, or the kids were already failing and they know that the school's just going to flunk them. So it's a bad situation across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I'm in some different groups with principals in St. Louis Public and out in the county. And I think, we all just sort of talk about how this is just cracked open what it means to learn and cracked open sort of the game of grades, right? Like, what does a grade actually mean? Like, why do kids want to learn right now? Like, what is the thing that would actually be helpful and supportive and nurturing to a child going through this traumatic event? And I think that there are some isolated pockets where that's going well, but I agree. I think my heart's just breaking for schools right now and for kids.
I'm very curious to how they're actually grading this. How do you know the child is retaining it and not retaining it, comprehending it, and can apply it? It's almost like it's busy work and we're doing what we need to do to say that we did it, but we are behind and we know no way to catch up. In an earthquake, schools proactively know what to do. In a tornado, they proactively know what to do. Me and Crystal had a conversation. I was emotionally pissed because Crystal was like, hey, my baby got what she needs. Like, I'm good. Her kids are in private school. They know how to pull up. I was not okay with that, but here's what gave me a little bit of solace. My son's school at least told me, we trying to figure it out. And we don't know. But when they pulled up to the bridge, they pulled up with the truth and they're trying.
Yeah.
We deserve that. Even though you think we're poor and we live in the hood, we deserve better than what you're giving us. We deserve better than you making sure we get a brown bag lunch every day. We deserve better than you indirectly pushing your political agendas while telling me you're going to give me a brown bag lunch. I'm Gucci on your brown bag lunch. Can my son read?
Yeah.
Like, are you finna strip another teacher away? Do you understand the mental strain that the parents are going through, recognizing that their child is not only behind, but they can't read? Do you see me? Sawabona.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. So you even taking the courageous step to get on the bridge when you know that we will disrupt, but we are loving people. With loving kindness will I draw you to me. That's who we are. But we want change. We demand it.
Mm-hmm.
Can't we?
Yep. It's powerful words. Thank you for sharing them.
So I'm not sure if we have any questions. Doesn't look like we have any additional questions. I would love to bring you back in a couple of weeks and just really have a parent on here with you to just ask you some direct questions, parent to principal. What do you think about a parent to principal conversation?
I think that'd be great. I think my experience was all at the high school level. So definitely if there's a parent of a teenager who's got some questions or, feels like they're got a challenging situation. I've seen a lot in 13 years and with about 3,000 kids. So happy.
Okay. Well, I thank you, Ms. Renee, for coming on, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Yes.
Bye, St. Louis.
Bye-bye.